Welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to have another event in our Exponential Digital Ethics series today. Our focus will be on the societal impact of digital ethics. And we have a very important guest today, Ivana Bartoletti, who is joining us, as well as Dr. Jane Thomason. So all these elements, I think all three of us are reflecting the ambivalence across the globe. I think I see in all the types of social media publications and the professional publications, similar ambivalence. I wanted to touch also on an element that you mentioned, Jane, on trust in government and how in your case, things in your country, things have changed compared to before. Ivana, you wrote a recent book. Maybe you can comment a little bit on your recent book and what drove you to publish it. Your timing was impeccable. And I know when you started writing it, you didn't know what's gonna come, but maybe you can share a little bit with our audience what was the original driver and then how you perceive the book to be received right now by audiences worldwide.
I wrote the book from three different perspectives. One is as a feminist. So I wrote this book very much as a feminist, in the sense that I can see that with technology progressing at rocket speed and digitization and datafication in society, I just feel that especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, AI is much more than technology, but it's very much about power. And when it comes to power, I think there is a feminist approach to it, and we know very well as women that the power hierarchies in society matter very much. And so I wrote this book because as a sort of a feminist perspective, because I want this power to be distributed more equally. And then I wrote it as a privacy person, but not because when I went into privacy, and I was about 16 or 17, I went into it with a very individualistic approach. You know, I don't want to be watched, I don't want to be seen. But then I realized over time that privacy is not really about that, and that privacy is very much about the right to autonomy. And I don't necessarily agree with algorithms targeting me on the basis of some very personal information or something that is inferred about me. I have issues with the powers that algorithms are developing in relation to, for example, online manipulation, or predictive algorithms in relation to the ability to really construct a reality and define the sort of this relationship between the past and the future for individuals, some sort of self-fulfilling prophecies that I worry about. And I wrote it because I want people to talk about this. I don't believe that these issues should be limited to few people. And sometime when we talk, you know, often when we talk about these things, say, oh yes, this is so complicated, this is not, but it's not, you know, it's not about the machines, it's about the humans who are creating them. It's about asking ourselves, the fact that we can do something technologically doesn't mean that we want to do it as individuals. And sort of the power of algorithms in particular to edit, to curate, to somehow become gates to reality is something that I find very disconcerting. And privacy, to an extent, has gone from a very individual right to a more collective right to not to be manipulated through dark patterns or through Jane was saying correctly before, she was saying, well, yes, people have to take on it more ownership. They need to understand that they've been sort of willingly sharing data. But the reality, to some extent, is that we had no choice, and we still have no choice. And sometimes even the consent model is very much broken, you know, because we really haven't got that capacity to say yes or no to things. So we are drawn into it, that either by necessity or simply because of a deceitful design of the way that these things are construed. So I wrote this because I really wanted to bring the element of power underpinning all this, and really show to people in very simple terms, that that the technology is not neutral, that every single piece of technology is a techno-social artifact and breeds the context where it's deployed, and it's the context in which is trained and fed data, which is in turn data is not neutral either. So it's and the third element is about politics, and that is because I do firmly believe in the role of politics. And although over the past decades we've seen a big corporation playing a big role, even as sort of infrastructure in the world we live in, and to an extent we've seen people losing trust in government, I do believe that in the role of governance, and I do believe in the role of good principles, and the idea that we could eventually set up some governance around the way that we're going to deploy these technologies. And this is, to me, is absolutely essential. And when people say, I don't want to regulate AI, I always say, yes, but we're not really regulating artificial intelligence. I want to regulate the behavior around it. And I really want to make sure that, you know, artificial intelligence is benefiting the world. So the book is really a testament to all the people working in this sector, but it's also the idea that I want people to be talking about these issues at the kitchen table, and I want it to become mainstream and not leave the discussions around ethics to a few people in suits, but I want it to be a topic for everybody.
No, thank you, and congratulations for your book as well. And I think it's fantastic to get these conversations on the table. Just a couple of points, you know, that I'd like to make. The first one is again that thorny issue of governance, and I agree with you, and I agree that there should be governance and regulation. A big challenge that I see all around the world is just the lack of knowledge and understanding, and even digital literacy that people who are our elected officials have. And so I think there is that challenge both for elected officials and for regulators about how they keep up and even understand what it is that they should be governing. But the second point, which I was very encouraged about, I was reading last week about a survey of 100,000 developers, and 80% of the developers felt that they should be taking ethical considerations into the design of the technology that they were building. But again, I do think that there's a comment to be made that a lot of times, you know, the developers are highly scientific, you know, often a little bit on the spectrum, not necessarily fully understanding the context of what it is they're building. So I think there needs to be partnerships from the highest level to the level of building the tech, with people who can help those devs understand what might be the unexpected consequences of what they're doing and the sorts of things, the ethical questions that they need to be answering about the tech. So I think there's a continuum, and I very strongly feel at an organisational level, and I've made this point before, that we need to demand of CEOs that they are the ones who are being accountable for the technology that's being developed, for them being ethical by design, for leading the ethical questioning and consideration about the products that they're developing. It's not the CTO or someone else down the track. It's got to be CEO-led. So I maintain that we've got a tremendous public information education gap that somehow we have to fill if we're to get to the point where we can have that sort of governance.
Thank you. I really enjoyed both of your comments on this, and I can echo that. Definitely, when we look at the global level, design thinking for emerging technologies, I think is one solution. And I wanted to get your thoughts also on another topic that has come up quite a lot lately, which is the issue of developing smart cities. So on the one hand, developing smart cities and pushing the pace of developing a digital economy is very much welcome. We know that the World Economic Forum and the World Bank have huge alliances that focus on this. On the other hand, again, I worry if we don't have ethics by design when we build these new cities for the future, we set ourselves up for another decade or century of issues or problems or challenges. So can you both comment on, if you could give advice and someone would really want to listen, how could we build these smart cities so that they have ethics incorporated and embedded into the fabric of the city? Ivana?
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right, Ingrid. I mean, the potential of smart cities is great, and I think a lot of people would see the benefit when they see technologies being introduced in their sort of in the management of the city where they live. I think, just briefly, I think the main issue is again how to make sure that people have trust in the way the data is being handled. So there is one thing that I particularly like about the GDPR, which is the data protection by negotiation. So I always say when working with smart cities, it's very important to do it with the people who are going to live there, and understand what people are going to comfortable be share, without being nudged into having to share, but also really making the most of the privacy preserving technologies that we have at our disposal. And there are many. I mean, coding privacy and privacy engineering is although we still have a long way to go and they're still very expensive, but it is the way forward. But I do think that the most important thing, really, and I've seen it working, is to have that deliberation and to have that space where you take the time to really engage with citizens. This is particularly important now at the time of sort of the debate that we're having around facial recognition, which is a debate that scares me very much. And the reason why it scares me, because people think that it can be solved with a technological fix. People say, oh yes, once facial recognition technology will be able to recognize Black women and do it well, then what is the problem? Well, no, because the problem is not just the mathematical issue, is also deployment of technology, because the sheer deployment of something like facial recognition technology, regardless of how well it works or doesn't work, can still be used to wrap surveillance around certain communities. The reason why I'm saying this is because when we think about smart cities, it's not just about technological fixes. It's not just about the best tech that we've got out there or how to fix algorithms so that they work perfectly. The issue is, what is the impact that the actual deployment of the technology will have on the spaces that we share together as individuals and citizens? And to me, this is the most important thing. And if there is a problem I've had with the whole ethics debate, is that we focus so much on the data, on the technology, on the product, without thinking that actually it's not just about fixing a technological solution, but it's really about understanding what is the impact that that piece of technology can have on the way that we live, and whether we want it or not, regardless of how well their technology works. So with smart cities, I think if done properly, it can be an amazing opportunity, a very pragmatical opportunity to engage in a meaningful discussion with the people in that place and say, what are we prepared to do? How is this going to change? And having people of all colors to discuss this, having people from all backgrounds, including the younger ones and including the older ones. So it's really important, I think, if we want to get this right, which I see the benefit of it, massive, I think it's really important to do this with the people who actually live in that place.
Thank you.
And I would just like to add the dimension of a gender smart city, because I think that it's really important that we look at what are the needs of women in particular, whether it's for safety or for movement around the city, when they need to be doing things, and make sure at all aspects of looking at the different smart city processes and connections and so forth, we're thinking about the particular needs of women in that city.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's a topic that I'm very focused on, and I'm doing several international projects. So I hope that we can have this as a call to action and a shout out to those that are decision makers. I can't believe it, but we're almost at the end of our session. It just went by so fast. So I wanted us to close on one more topic, which is, I notice a lot of discomfort in many when they have to discuss ethics. So they avoid it a lot of times. And instead, I see people trying to use the word purpose. So there's a very delicate and complex relationship between ethics and purpose. In my opinion, they're not equivalent. They're very closely related. But I think it would be nice to hear your opinions about the trends that we see that a lot of companies have set forth to promote, that they're purpose-oriented, purpose-driven, that they are inclusive and care about societal impact. But what, in your view, and then we're going to close, is the relationship between ethics and purpose, and how do you think it can be balanced? Ivana?
It's an interesting question. And to be honest, I think purpose is part of a wider ethical approach. So if I work with an organization and if I say to them, you know, how are you going to build your ethics in the design and by design, you know, one of the pillars would be purpose. You know, you need to, you're not deploying a technology or you're not embarking in a project just because it's glamorous or but because it has to fit a purpose. And this is the problem that we're having with a lot of technology. We're deploying it because it's cool, and companies are doing it because, oh yes, you know, we have to innovate. But the problem is, what problem are you trying to solve? Is that productivity? Great. Is that because you want to do something? That's fine. But it really has to be focused around the purpose of that you want to achieve. And then obviously, and then you move on to other things, which is around justice, and that includes privacy. But I think purpose is part of this. And I do understand that companies may find ethics strange, because they may say, well, you know, ethics is so relative. You know, we all have different ideas. We all have different. But I think this is part of the problem, and this is a problem that we must address. And to me, purpose is one element of an ethical strategy, which needs to really incorporate the bigger impact that a particular project or build or organization or new piece of technology is having on the wider society.
Thank you. Any closing remarks, Dr. Thomason? Yeah.
Yeah, just if I could add to that, I mean, ethics are the foundational principles upon which we build our society and our organization and how we behave. There are a lot of technology companies whose purpose might not fundamentally in itself be necessarily a positive social impact. Let's think about financial services. They're looking at speed and efficiency and, you know, faster settlements and reducing middlemen and so forth in financial settlements. The fact that they have our data, they're storing it on the cloud, there are privacy concerns, there are all sorts of other issues, means that we need to have them looking at the way they do their business with that ethical lens around transparency and justice and privacy and responsibility and so forth. So I mean, I guess there's a broader definition of purpose, which is, it might be that we have a purpose to improve the planet and humanity. But I think ethics and purpose are completely different, although purpose can be, you know, part of an ethical company's approach. And I just don't think people should be able to sidestep those basic foundational principles of ethics that any sound society should be based on.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think we touched on a lot of complex issues. I hope this can be a shout out to many to also enjoy Ivana's latest book. And I want to thank you both for sharing your insights, your expertise, and I hope we can have another session real soon.